Thank you for joining us for this Repertoire podcast. And now, your host, Scott Adams.
Hey everybody, Scott Adams here with Repertoire Magazine. One of my favorite interviews or jobs I get to do throughout the year is talk about the Medical Distribution Hall of Fame, which we host here at Repertoire. We have all the plaques from past inductees. We've been doing this since right around 2000, and right around 2009, I guess, 2010, somewhere in there, maybe, 2009, 2010, we did our first dinner ever around the Hall of Fame, and we inducted John Sasson. This dinner each year is a roast that we do for the inductees, and we obviously sell per plate tickets and sponsored tables, and then we give the net proceeds of the night to the inductees charity of choice. So each year we get to write a nice check to a charity from the inductees that are going in. So this year's inductees are the Legends of Lab. And today we are on the podcast here at Repertoire with Mr. Brad Thompson of NDC, who has been in Lab for the majority of his career and a huge cheerleader for the independent distributors out there. Brad is one of my closest friends in the industry, and I'm extremely excited to get to induct him into the class here in 2025. Here we go with Brad Thompson. Brad, thank you so much for being on the call, man. And before we even start, let me just say congratulations on the 2025 Hall of Fame class. You're going in with two other wonderful individuals that are just like yourself, Legends of Lab, with Jonathan Overby at Sekisui and Lisa Wickstrom at Abbott. So congratulations, my friend.
Thank you, Scott. And I'll tell you this, I am absolutely humbled and honored to be inducted into the Healthcare Hall of Fame. I know when you told me, at least initially, I was absolutely, completely blown away. But thank you so much.
Yeah, I told every year when I get to tell the folks that are going in and make that phone call, it's probably the coolest thing I get to do all year, and just the reactions that I get. And obviously yours was pretty funny, and Jonathan's was equally as funny, and Lisa was just so taken back by it. But it is one of the coolest things I get to do. I'm very blessed to get to do that and get to MC it, and the whole night is just a fun night. So looking forward to it with you three and getting to honor you guys that night, and it should be pretty fun.
Just to add to that, Scott, when you told me, I said, "You got to be kidding," right? I said,
it's not exactly what you said, but yeah.
I mean, it was not quite that, but, and it was funny, Bill Sparks was there, and the next day he said, Scott was just kidding, right? I said, "Are you kidding me?" Right? So
I didn't know that he had done that.
He did. The next morning he says, that was all big. He was just playing on you.
He never told me that. He told you I was messing with you.
But thank you again so much. It's an honor, pleasure.
Yeah, it was cool. You and J.O. are the first two that I was ever able to tell in person. So that was kind of cool. Usually it's on the phone. I had to tell Lisa on the phone. Obviously she's in San Diego. So I wasn't out there to get to tell her live, but anyhow. Hey, before we get started and start really talking industry stuff and kind of where you've come from and business and where you're at today and all of the fun things you've done over the course of your career, talk to me a little bit about kind of growing up. Where'd you grow up, kind of your family, your mentors? You got some great stories about your dad, who was a military guy, that I've heard over the years. And just give us a little color to your life prior to coming into the healthcare business.
Well, like you, Scotty, I grew up in a military family. I know your dad was in the military. I always say I took my first breath in the United States Army, and the year and day that I graduated from college, my dad retired. And so, he was a career Army aviator, 2 tours in Vietnam. I had the pleasure of growing up, and listening, around, sort of the table, some of the other pilots, younger guys that have been in Vietnam, and, just what a wonderful experience. I always say, I started my life at the Panama Canal Zone and ended up going to junior high and high school in Fairbanks, Alaska, and all points in between. And so it really afforded me a lot of opportunities, to really learn about people just in general. I will say that I have to say my dad, and I know, typically you usually are asked who in the industry would you consider your mentor. I just have to say my dad, and I think he taught me, work ethic. One thing that he did not allow was excuses, right? Failure was not an option. Scott, you probably felt some of that as well. And I do have a kind of a funny story. I've spent my entire life trying to make an A. And I was in the 7th grade and I had a report card and I had straight A's, and man, I was really proud of myself. And my dad was in his back bedroom in his bathroom shaving, and I, put the report card in front of him, and he looked at it. He reached down in his pocket and he pulled out a dime and he flicked it at my chest, and he said, "You got an A- in English. You better do better next time." And I'm like, "What?" So again, that was sort of my life, growing up. And as I said earlier, Scott, I'm sure you had a little taste of that. My dad was an interesting character, and being certainly a career military officer. And then in the industry, and really what got me started, and we certainly can talk in more detail about that, but it was Charlie Davis. He was the founder and president of Labsco out of Louisville, Kentucky, and that's when I started my career in 1992. So I learned a whole lot from him, especially about culture. And I think what we see with a lot of companies is maybe that's somewhat going by the wayside. But I look at what he drove home to me is that really that culture being a core competency, and it was always important, something I never forgot.
Yeah, a couple of things there to unpack, and obviously my dad was 20 years in the Marine Corps, and so we've shared some of those stories over the years of some of the funny things. My dad has more one-liners than any human I've ever been around, and he's the same way, as far as being a Marine. And there were no excuses. It was and it was black and white.
You hear those, Scotty, you hear those stories of people that say, "Oh, the dog ate my homework assignment," and all that. That was never an excuse. And you didn't say, "Well, I just don't really like the teacher." That went over like it just never went over.
Absolutely. You talked about Charlie there and kind of the start of your career, Brad. Walk us through that a little bit. And I want you to go back a little further, because you have had an interesting, working on airplanes, training dogs, just kind of some of the things that have gotten you to this point in your career. Because all of that goes into it.
I like to kind of coin it, my, career path, and finally arriving in U.S. healthcare. It was sort of a long way around, if you will. I went to college here just west of Nashville, in Clarksville, Tennessee, at Austin Peay State University. And, what got me there was that opportunity. My dad, that was his last career assignment. He retired there. I left Alaska, graduated from high school there in Fairbanks, and then coming down, and going to college. Funny thing, never really knew what I was going to do, but I thought at that time I was going to be a school teacher. I was thinking more of a high school school teacher. I majored in English, minored in journalism, and I had a focus in French and art. So put that all together.
There's something I've never known in the 20 years I've known you. I wish I did, because
I did win an award.
That would have been pulled out
when
for
I was
sure.
in college, the most promising French student, which I have that plaque. I have that plaque somewhere. But my dad, being in the military, when we were up in Alaska, they had an adult career development center, and so on the side.
Wait a second. French?
Yes, French, and I can't speak a word of it today. So I know it's crazy.
My goodness.
It's crazy. But kind of go back, being up in Alaska, they had this adult careers development center, and they offered an aviation program, and this specifically is your A&P license, which is your airframe and power plant mechanics license. And so on the side, I opted to go through that. So when I graduated from high school, and on my 18th birthday, I got my FAA, aircraft mechanics license. So when I came down and went to college at Austin Peay, I went to work at a little airfield there called Outlaw Field, and I worked my way through college as an aircraft mechanic. And so, you kind of just think about and, kind of getting to this sort of a long way. And then once I graduated from college, I drew a circle on a map. And Scott, you remember back then we had paper maps, right? You don't see that much anymore, but I drew a circle on a map about a 500-mile radius. And I said, "Where do you want to live, Brad?" And within 500 miles. And so I selected Asheville, North Carolina. And as you know, Scott, I'm from Western North Carolina, and this was about 45, 50 miles from the town that I was born in. And so I opted to move to Asheville, North Carolina. And so it was there that I started a small sole proprietorship business. We were in the dog boarding, grooming, training, and supplies. So I had a kennel, if you will, and I did that for about 9 years. And I'll say this, if I have to look, and it's kind of like you were asking me about mentors, life was kind of my mentor. And in this situation, it really taught me a whole lot about what the customer experience is and how important, taking care of the customer was. And it's been something that I've lived by, my entire career. And so I was there. I was also part of a search and rescue organization. And now when I say search and rescue, we use dogs to track and lost people. So I think the last year that I was with them in the late 80s, we did 52 searches that year, which means we did roughly one a week. And so we were an all volunteer group. And to kind of get to where I'm going, that's where I met Charlie's daughter. She worked for the state of North Carolina. She also was part of our search and rescue group. She had a German Shepherd. And so when I first met Charlie back in the day, he had one of his children, which was educated. Lisa had a master's degree. And so, he was really trying to get her to come back to Louisville. And so we were moving to Louisville, right? She said, look, I'm going to take the job. And she went to work there. And I had absolutely zero intentions of really getting in healthcare. But I had a sort of a bit of an extraordinary event happen in 1992. I found out I had cancer. And so, and that leads to a lot of other discussions, Scott, we can talk about, a bit later. But as I was going through chemotherapies, which it was horrific, and I had major surgeries and all the above. And as I was recovering, Charlie approached me and he said, look, because I was doing construction, I was building log houses, in the Asheville area and doing a lot of hard physical work. And he said, I know that there's no way you can do that. He said, how about just come in the warehouse, do some pick, pack, shipping, get to know the products, that sort of thing. And so that's how I got started. That was in 1992. He gave me that opportunity. And the next step, after about 3 or 4 months of being in this warehouse, he said, hey, I'd really like someone to lead and develop our telesales program. And so for the next 2 years, I led that initiative at Labsco, and then I was promoted to director of marketing. And so the rest is history.
Yeah, it's amazing how many of us started out pick, packing, and shipping in the warehouse.
I mean, I think about you. I know car dealerships. I mean, there's a lot, right? We all sort of had a bit of a sordid past. But for me, I was in my 30s early 30s, actually, before I got, involved directly with U.S. healthcare. So.
Yeah, I spent my first 6 months in the industry. I obviously graduated school, and like you said, I was at the Toyota dealership selling cars. But then my first 6 months I was in the warehouse at HealthLink, going in the freezer, pulling media, and then out on the warehouse in Jacksonville, Florida. So you'd go from 20 degrees, 30 degrees in the freezer to 100 degrees and 100% humidity. I think that's probably one of the best training grounds. I learned more touching, feeling products. Yeah. So when I started selling those products, I had a visual of what they looked like, the whole bit, and it was an excellent training. I think it also helps what the people behind the scenes go through.
Absolutely.
I never would call on a Friday and ask for samples to be sent out, because I was like, when that would happen to me back there, I'm like, you got to be kidding me, trying to get out of here for the weekend.
Right. And you know what, you make a great point, Scott. It allows you to really have a better understanding of the entire supply chain.
Yep.
And not, those that have never had that experience of working in a warehouse, they really haven't visibility of what's in all that. So, yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Brad, I want to talk a little bit about, before we get into some of the other stuff that I wanted to ask you today, the Hall of Fame. We've been doing it since 2000. Some amazing human beings have gone in it prior, starting out with Mr. Stover and Dwight Titus all the way back. I think it was either 2000 or 2001 when they went. Back then, we just did the cover of a magazine and a story. And, I always mention Kevin Newman when we're talking about this, because Kevin's the one that gave Brian and Chris the idea that we should be hosting it as the industry magazine. And then, in 2008, I guess, is when I came on here, and Brian came to me and he goes, I think we're going to start doing a roast. And it kind of took it to a whole different level, and then giving the money back to charity from the night's event. But what I love about it, and I didn't mean to go down this path with me, I want you to talk about it, but is it's a night the whole industry comes together and everybody lays their weapons at the door and there's no business. And it's just, we're just kind of there and have some fun and be able to be thankful for the industry that we're in. But I want to give you kind of a little bit of or a lot, however much you want to take, just talk about the Hall of Fame. And I know you love it. It's one of your favorite nights of the year. And you've known a lot of the folks that have gone in over the years, from Bill McLaughlin and Yates and, folks that have been in your career. So what are your thoughts on it? Just as a night and as an event? And
Well, just first comment, it's absolutely a wonderful event. And the fact that you've continued to grow and continue this year in and year out has just been absolute pleasure, certainly for me and certainly the folks at NBC to participate. To you, it's a gala. I mean, everybody's in suits, women in gowns in a lot of instances. And, kind of to go back, just all the people that historically have been Hall of Famers. It's just been, these are the people that I've dealt with in my career, which is my third year. But then, kind of looking back, I kind of think about folks that I've worked with closely. You mentioned, I mean, when I started out at Labsco, we were an Inco dealer. And so, I interfaced and intersected with the Inco team, early on in my career, the Yates Ferrises and the Bill McLaughlins and those folks, again, just everybody, wonderful people. And then, I just think about last year, Mark Seitz, for me is an extremely special person. I worked with him for 17 years as he was president and CEO of NBC. And, I learned a lot from him and to see him and actually have Jim Stover there at that event.
yeah, that's amazing.
Absolutely incredible. And to have, a photograph, the NBC team with Jim and Mark and Jack Stevens, who's our current president and CEO, was just an awesome event. And so, you kind of made a comment about us leaving our swords at the door. And I'm going to say this about our industry. I was on our consultant. We have a consultant that had reached out, and they were talking to us about, really, asking about our industry just in general. And he said, look, I mean, I deal with other companies that when they talk about their competitor, they're looking for every opportunity just to absolutely destroy them. And I said, that's just not our industry.
It's not.
We do compete, but it's one big family. I mean, these are folks, whether they're direct competitors of yours, but we've all known each other our entire careers. And while we are, in a lot of instances, somewhat fiercely competitive, we all are, we're all salespeople at heart. It's just a wonderful industry. And I'm happy that I feel like that the Hall of Fame is really sort of that conduit that really pulls us all together, at least one night. And I think it's awesome. And thank you, Scott, for continuing that legacy.
Yeah, it's been a gift for me to be able to continue Brian's kind of vision there. And I love it. It's my favorite night of the year, and I could not do it without Anna McCormick and the team here. And in some years where we've had issues where my team couldn't make it, Julie Berry and helped me one year. That was when we were in Chicago. It was just a brutal year, but it has been a blast. And you mentioned something there that I hadn't thought about, but having 98-year-old Jim Stover this past year was pretty special for Doug and Mark getting to go in, and really a cool night. Brad, you've done, I'm gonna shift gears on you here. I want you to talk a little bit about it already, your battle with cancer, and you've got to do some cool stuff to raise money for cancer, which is ultimately what we will do. I want to get with you and Jonathan and Lisa to really pick who we're going to give the money to this year. But you've had your battle with it, and then you got to do a couple of cool things to raise money on your own. We covered it in the magazine. But give a little color to that. Tell the audience who hasn't heard the bike from San Diego to St. Augustine and then the motorcycle around the world. And you got to talk about the wreck and those folks taking care of you. Yeah.
I've had a number of, And thanks, Scott. Cancer has been a big part of my life. As I said earlier, in 1992, I was diagnosed with actually testicular cancer. And, interestingly enough, when I was diagnosed, I remember the oncologist asked me, he said, you look like somebody that wants to hear it straight. I said, absolutely. I mean, and I kind of work on percentages, right? And so, my first question to him is when it was diagnosed, I said, so, what's my prognosis? It's a percentage. And he says, well, he said, we were able to do a needle biopsy on it, on the tumor, but he said it's going to be one of two types of cancer. And I don't recall, the two specifics as it relates to the types of cancers. But he said, if it's type A, to put it to you bluntly, your goose is cooked. And he said, if it's type B, I'm going to be able to help you. And I said, okay. And I said, so what's our next step? And he said, we need to start, chemotherapy immediately. And he said, if you respond, he said, you'll be a 90% plus chance of cure, complete cure. And I thought, man, that's pretty good. So, first step was to go through my first round of chemo, had my first meeting with my oncologist, and he said the same thing. He said, look, you're going to make it. Things are looking good for you. And so even though, it was a bit of a challenging experience, going through the surgeries and the chemotherapies and that sort of thing, I still had that positive sort of outlook, knowing that if I fight and I fight this, that the chances are I'm going to come out on top. And so fast forward, I was at LabSco. This was in 2002, and I got this crazy idea in my mind.
Sitting here trying to think about a needle biopsy. I'm like, I bet you remembered some French during that moment.
Let me just tell you, if you were going to put a large, long needle into a watermelon, what that sounds like, it kind of squeaks as the needle goes in. It's crazy. So, but yeah, it was, and there were I could talk to you for days on end about all that experience. It was just a crazy time. But in 2002, I had this idea. I said, 10 years, it was kind of I was at a plateau. I've been cancer-free for 10 years, and I felt like it was time, to do something special and give back. And I had ridden bicycles on the road, my entire life, and I had a road bike at the time. And I came up with this idea to do a cross-country bicycle ride and raise money at that time for the American Cancer Society. And so I called it Life Cycle 2002. And it was, as you mentioned earlier, Scotty, it was a ride from San Diego, California to St. Augustine, Florida. It was about 2,800 miles. I averaged over 80 a day. It took me 38 days total from San Diego to St. Augustine, and about 35 pedal days. I rode, halfway to San Antonio, which is, as you know, Scott, my brother and his family all lives there. So I stopped, put my bike in the shop, spent the weekend with them, and started back on a Monday and finished up the ride.
I think it's cool too that your mom and dad got to travel along with you in the van.
Yep. And so that was probably, I was in my early 40s. And, I've been away from my parents. Of course, I always visit them, talk to them on the phone weekly and that sort of thing. But I really had not spent any, time with them of significance. And so, Charlie Davis thought I was absolutely out of my mind at the time. And my parents had attended our national sales meeting at LabSco that year, and he got them off to the side. And he said, look, I know my dad had already retired from the military then. And he said, look, I'll fund a van, your transportation, hotels, everything. I need you to follow him, in a van. And so my parents came to me and asked me, and I said, well, listen, I can't really tell you what to do, but I will tell you that this ride is my ride, and I don't want you coming in, it's raining, you're looking cold, you're this and that, I said, it's my ride. I said, but, if you want to just follow along or whatever you guys want to do, I'm not going to stop you. And it ended up being probably one of the more positive events of my life. Every evening I had dinner with my parents. My dad was funny. They would always get a hotel en route, and he would send me a text message. We even had text messages then, but he'd send me a note back and said, hey, we're at the Days Inn en route. And he would always get a bottom floor so I could just roll my bicycle in. And back then I drank vodka. And so he would have some crackers and some vodka and stuff. And I would just roll my bike in, have a drink, and then have dinner with him. So it was an absolutely incredible
Stoli rocks, hold the fruit.
Yep. That was back when I drank vodka. I drink vodka mixed now. I just don't drink it on the rocks like J.O. does. J.O.'s still a vodka guy.
Lemon wedge.
A lemon wedge. But we had it was just a wonderful event. And I will tell you one quick story. My mother, we were riding, going to dinner, it was dark, and she loved vodka too, and she was drinking vodka, and she looks over at me, she says, can I ask you a question? I said, well, sure. She says, and I'm not going to go into all the details on this, but she said, who was your first? And I said,
oh, gosh.
What? And she said, I just want to know, come on, tell me. And I said, you're out of your mind, whatever. But that was kind of the nature of the trip. We had a very, very, very close relationship, and it was wonderful.
That's awesome. And then talk about the motorcycle ride, because there's some stories around that one for sure.
So that one, that was in 2012. So again, I had this crazy idea, is probably lack of a better term, to do this around the world motorcycle ride. And so, and I have people, it's kind of funny, they ask me, say, so where did you start and where did you end? I said, well, I started in Nashville and ended in Nashville. So, and then they always ask the other questions, well, how did you get across the ocean? And I said, well, I haven't quite figured out how to walk on water. So I air freighted, and, I flew from, across, from, western part of the U.S. to Korea. But what I did, and I'll just tell you the route, I left here, I went to Fairbanks, Alaska, down to Anchorage. I actually stayed with Dale Sawyer and his family at Alaska Scientific, got my bike crated up. I flew and I air freighted the bike to Incheon, Korea, and then went across Korea, caught a 24-hour ferry from Donghae, Korea to Vladivostok, Russia, which is the start of the Siberian Railroad. Rode all the way across, Siberia, crossed into Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Belgium, France, did the channel. And then I went London to Montreal. Of course, from London to Montreal, Canada, I air freighted the bike again then, and then rode from Montreal back down to Nashville. And it ended up taking me 50 days. I had 15,000 road miles. And at the end of the day, and I say collectively, folks in our industry, family, and friends, we raised $100,000 for Raleigh Foundation, which was a childhood cancer research foundation out of Atlanta, kind of there, Scotty. So
yeah.
A wonderful, wonderful event. I did have a significant crash. I had a van. It was a old Russian military van that had pulled out in front of me, and of course sideswiped him, and I went down and broke a number of ribs and just absolutely tore the bike all to pieces. But they I built a network of people around the world, and this particular group is called the Siberian Bears, and they had, groups of Siberian bears all the way across Russia. And so, when I had a couple of young men that were on motorcycles on holiday that stopped right behind me, helped me get the bike up, and they said, is there anybody you could call? And one of them spoke really good English. And I said, yeah. So I pulled out my laptop and found the Siberian Bears, place to call. Within the hour they were there. And they were the ones that helped me get through everything with the police and everything, and took me to the hospital and put me up and repaired my motorcycle and got me out of there. But a bit of a funny event, and I had broken ribs, so I was not doing very well, but I was accommodating them. And they took me to one of those, if you've heard of these Russian baths. So I show up at this Russian bath house, and I go in there, and there's men and women. The men don't have any clothes on, and the women, are in their bathing suits. And I'm like, and they go, Brad, naked, Brad. I'm like, oh my goodness. And so I'm in there with these folks I don't even know, and they're drinking vodka. And you know what the Russian word is for vodka, Scott?
I do not.
Vodka. And you know the Russian word for whiskey? Whiskey. So, it crosses all continents. I mean, the words are the same, but they drink a lot of vodka, but they put me in they put me in this sauna, and the whole time I'm riding, I kept seeing these big oak leaves for sale, like these bundles of these oak leaves. I really wasn't quite sure why they were selling them. But when I got in there, they had these wet, damp, hot oak leaves, and they had me lie down, and they kind of spanked me with these oak leaves, and supposedly has this medicinal purpose, or whatever.
So let me get this straight. You were a minor French major, and you've been spanked by oak leaves from Russians.
From Russians, right?
Excellent.
And Scotty, I got to say this, because there was a guy, and the Russians came in right after we left Vietnam back in the early 70s, and and this guy, he looked like he would have been about my dad's age, or maybe a little bit younger at the time. And I said, we got to talking about it, and he said, well, Sergio here, he was in the military, Russian military, and I got to talk about my dad and being in Vietnam. And he says, this guy, I'm not kidding you, he took his t-shirt and ripped it open. He had like this big old tattoo on his chest. He said, we came in after you left. The Russians were in Vietnam. But I don't know, man. It just, it was it was an awesome event. And those folks took absolutely unbelievable care of me. And at the end of the day, and I just want to touch on this, they repaired my motorcycle. They put me up in a place. They'd taken me to the hospital, pretty much all expense paid. They got the bike back together. We were hunting for parts. And I said, what do I owe you? I owe you for this. I owe you something. He goes, nothing, Brad. And I said, I don't understand.
That's my favorite part of the story.
I said, I don't understand. I said, I don't understand. And he said, what, will you wait just a minute? And I said, yeah. And he said, and this was at midnight, and he left. And I thought, I'm never going to get out of here. I'm just going to get on the Siberian Road and, just leave my motorcycle here. And he brings his young daughter back, and she's 16, 17-year-old, a beautiful young lady. And he said, Brad, can you just talk English to her? She's studying English at school and blah, blah, blah. So, I had a conversation with her, and at the end of the day, when it came down to how much I owed, he said, nothing. And I finally said, well, I don't get this. I don't understand. His line was, because you're a biker. And, the fact that you were a biker, and so that network, folks globally, and they took care of me. And so, and I, of course, said the same thing to him. If you ever come, to the United States, know that you've got somebody here that is going to take wonderful care of you. But it was just, sort of that human experience there that was just over the top. And it's just such an awesome time, even though, it was sort of negative for me and had that wreck. I mean, just being able to interface with some of the.
Yeah, but it makes the story so much better, and getting to meet those people. And there was some reason that happened to you. Yep. Brad, over the course, I got two more questions for you here. Over the course of your career, I would say that you are probably one of the biggest, for lack of a better word, cheerleaders of the independent distributor. And I know, you guys there work with your few hundred every day. Talk a little bit about the value that those independent distributors bring to our space, to our industry.
Well, beyond just the whole idea of distribution, its importance, just the whole idea. I had somebody that was talking to me, they didn't even understand distributors and why you even needed a distributor in India. I said, well, think about, U.S. healthcare, like at NDC, we're managing over almost 500, supplier relationships. And if a healthcare provider wanted to buy one or two of those items from all of those different manufacturers, it absolutely makes no supply chain sense whatsoever. So just at a high level, distribution is critical, part of our everyday life. But when it comes specifically to what we do, especially with these independent dealers, I've always said that, you can take a distributor, let's just say a Master Fit, and they're out of Jackson, Tennessee, and they cover probably the part of this state, part of northern Mississippi. But here's the thing. A lot of these folks have been in these companies 20, 30 years, their first, second, third generation companies. They've developed long-standing relationships, obviously, with these healthcare providers. In a lot of instances, their kids went to school together, they played sports together, all the above. And so that partnership and those relationships that they've developed over time is tremendous, right? And Scotty, just like we all say, is at the end of the day, this business is still about those relationships.
100%, man.
Obviously, you have to do what you say you're going to do. You have to, provide the right product at the right time, all of that. But I think building that relationship, and I think that independent dealer is what it exemplifies.
Yeah, I love that. And it's relationship. As we close, Brad, talk a little bit about kind of what legacy you'd like to leave in the industry.
I think, and this has been more recent than not, as I said earlier, you learned a little bit more about me. I went to college really to be an educator. Believe it or not, I was going to teach English in junior high or high school, and that's what I thought I was going to do. And then, things changed for me, and I went, down a different career path. But that whole idea of teaching has always been sort of an inherent trait of mine. And more recently, I've gotten more involved with a mentoring program over the last couple of years here at NDC. It's called WIN. It's called Women in NDC. And so I lead a mentoring group of, at this time right now, about 6 young women within our organization. And, for me, number one, I'm driven And my number one priority is we're all driven by the number, certainly the budget, the annual operating plan. So that's number one. That's always my priority because we're all salespeople at heart. That's our job and what we do. But secondly, I've got the ability, Ian, I got to say this for Ian Fardy, who's our VP of marketing. He and I are in the twilight of our mediocre careers. And so as we approach, the end of our journey, especially in U.S. healthcare. And by the way, I'm not going anywhere. I'm still here, and I'm going to be here till probably they tell me to go away. But what I've had, it's been a lot of fun, is to take and focus on young, highly talented folks within my organization and other organizations, people that I interface with, and help them elevate their careers, especially here at NDC. And help them elevate their careers and not. I don't need to be in the way of their career paths. Many of these people are 15 or 20 years younger than me. And it's extremely important that I'm here, to sort of pass down sort of that legacy and allow those folks to grow within our organization and wherever their careers end up. And so I hope that at the end of the day, you ask the question if I could leave something behind. That's really, for me, that's the legacy that I really want to leave behind.
You're a good man, Brad Thompson. I love you, buddy.
Love you too, Scotty. I really appreciate it. I appreciate, certainly I'm honored, honestly, to be a part of this next class of Hall of Famers. It was funny, as I sort of went back and looked, you start looking at all the names that you and me, and we've all interfaced with or intersected with in our entire careers, and many of which are now, members of your Hall of Fame. And what a privilege. And I'm really looking forward to the event. And certainly the two other inductees this year, Jonathan and Lisa, it's just going to be an awesome evening, and we're really looking forward to it.
Absolutely, man. I appreciate you. You're so deserving of it. And, for folks out there that don't know, it's not just about being in the industry for a long period of time. It's about giving back to the industry. And you definitely have done that, and giving back to cancer research and, doing the things that you've done to give back to your fellow man. And so appreciate the heck out of you, and congratulations. And thanks for being on the podcast with me.
All right. Hey, thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of the day. See you.
Thanks,
Scotty.
Brad.
All right. Bye-bye.
Well, thank you for sticking with me and Brad there on the conversation with him going into the Hall of Fame. That's going to be a fun night. Love to have you attend if you can. Like I said at the beginning, it is a per plate deal for individuals. And then we obviously sell sponsored tables. Each year we end up selling anywhere from 8 to 10, 12 tables for organizations that want to come and support the program. And like I said, the whole night, the net proceeds of the event go to the charity. So this is not a moneymaker for us in any way, shape, or form. This is all about the industry and about the Hall of Fame and honoring these folks that are going in. So have a great day, and we will see you soon.